Okay, so we're apparently live on Facebook now. You want to check and see? I did everything I was told to stream on Facebook. I'm actually broadcasting on Zoom because it's easier for me. So I also want to invite anyone who wants to come. If you're on Facebook, you can come to Zoom if you want. And you can make also comments on Facebook, and the comments will be sent to the Zoom chat. I'm going to open the Zoom chat. Yeah. Okay, we're on Facebook. I followed the instructions properly.
You are on Facebook, Guru Maharaj. Everything is working perfectly.
Okay, I'm not that. See how tech savvy I am? Even though I'm from another generation.
Everything is working perfectly.
So, Hare Krishna to everyone. So, from now on, the plan is that we will broadcast on Zoom for all of you who want to come on Zoom, and then I can see you on Zoom. That we will broadcast. And then for those of you who feel more comfortable on Facebook, you can stay on Facebook and make your comments on Facebook. And Nadia will be sending the comments from Facebook to the chat.
Yes, Maharaj. Can you please make me a co-host also?
Can I what?
Can you please make me a co-host also? I will check it. Can you please make me a co-host?
I didn't hear what you said.
Can I what? Can you please make me a co-host also? I will check it. Can you please make me a co-host?
I didn't hear what you said. And I place your, can you write that in chat? I didn't understand what you said. There's a lot of feedback. Can you make me a co-host? Oh, I thought you said Facebook post. All right, hold on. Hold on, everyone. Okay. Okay, Hare Krishna. So we're going to see if this works. Simultaneously I'm speaking on Zoom now. For all who want to be on Zoom, show your lotus face. And then you can make comments on Zoom, ask questions, make your comments on Zoom, on Facebook also. So yeah, everyone mute your mic. Okay. Namo Vishnu, can you hear me okay? I'm using a different mic, different system. I'm not at home, as you can tell. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasinivadi Paschati Dasatani. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. He Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. So I have my chat window open here in Zoom. Your chats from Facebook will be sent here. Everything is good. If you come on Zoom, I can see you. Get inspired. So, and you can see others. today I wanted to take off from where we left off in our discussion about Bhaktivinoda Thakur's mood. And as we've discussed before, the mood of a pure devotee is extremely difficult to understand. And we generally have really no choice but to try to understand it through our experience. But it's actually not the way we're supposed to understand it. And so we're supposed to educate ourselves about what is bhava, what is prema, love of Krishna. And that way we can enter into a more correct understanding of the moods of the pure devotee. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then when we look at their moods, we say things like, this seems like not a healthy way to think. If I think the way Bhaktivinoda Thakur thinks, that would be discouraging, perhaps depressing. So that's where we misunderstand. So I wanted to touch today on the topic of being transcendental and being human, and how we deal with both. Because when you become a devotee, you're still human, you haven't transcended, but you are learning about those who have transcended, and you are being taught to transcend, while at the same time, you have to deal with your humanness. So when we talk about humanness, we're talking about dealing with the needs of the physical and mental body. We're dealing with the imperfections of human beings, the mistakes we make. Sometimes we get upset when we shouldn't. Sometimes we say the wrong thing when we shouldn't. Sometimes we overeat, we oversleep, like this. That's what we call being human. And so it's important to acknowledge our humanness, at the same time, not use it as an excuse to be human, to be, or like I would say, to be too human. Because being too human means more or less being more animalistic. If you're using human in the sense that Bhagavatam would describe human, there's no problem in being human, because human has its qualifications. That you wouldn't become angry if you're human by Vedic standards. You would be forgiving if you're human by Vedic standards. You would be clean, gentle, and so forth. But when we talk about human as we use it in our language, we're talking about frailties. We're talking about giving in, and then we say, well, I'm only human. That's how we use it. And I think there needs to be a balance there, and a place for understanding our human limitations in the stage of sadhana, especially Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, so that we don't become discouraged by our humanness. At the same time, we don't give in to our weaknesses. So there's a slight, it's what we would say a juggling act. How can I juggle not giving into the weakness, and at the same time recognizing that in my current state I have the weakness, and there's certain weaknesses we have. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. Just like you may like to get up early, but when you get up early, you don't function well, or maybe you eventually become ill because you're not getting enough sleep. Your mind is tired, you're not functioning well. So although maybe you would like to get up at 2 a.m. every morning and go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and you try that for a few days, and then one day you sleep like 12 hours. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but sometimes that happens. You are not in the state of consciousness where you could sleep 4 hours, because it requires a state of consciousness, not just a physical state. But you'd like to do it, but you can't. So you have to balance these realities. So maybe you need 6 hours, maybe you need 7 hours, maybe you need 7.5, maybe you need 8. And you lament, oh, I wish I didn't have to sleep so much. But you have to. So it's not being used as an excuse, it's being used as a reality. So we make a distinction between using it as an excuse and acknowledging that this is how it is. And I'm trying to do better, but I can't do any better than I've tried to minimize my sleep, but I can only minimize it to a certain point. I've tried to control my anger. It's still an issue. I'm working on it. This is where I'm at. Not using it as an excuse. If I offend somebody, I take responsibility. But maybe I come from, maybe I have it's just my nature. I'm an angry person, or I have certain issues I haven't resolved. So we have to be able to not rationalize our faults away, but at the same time, we have to be able to accept where we are in our Krishna consciousness, our humanness, in a way that we can still remain enthusiastic. And so I want to tell a story. It's quite an interesting story, and it'll illustrate this point. I've told the story, but I don't think most of you have heard it, and I haven't told it in this context. So you're really going to like this. It's going to help you a lot. So in Juhu, where we have a temple in Bombay, the property was sold to us by a person whose intention was to cheat us. And he got a down payment of $50,000. And his plan was to create problems for us in getting permission to build a temple there. And if we didn't build a temple at a certain period of time, then we would have to give the land back to him because we weren't using it for the stated purpose. So what he did was he bribed lawyers and he bribed government workers so they wouldn't give us the permit. So we were doing everything we could to get the permits. Later, we found out that our lawyers were actually on his side. So it was impossible to get the permits. But every day, the devotees would go from Juhu into Mumbai, which is a horrible train ride. Mumbai usually is very hot. It's a crowded Indian city. Working with a bureaucracy in India, in those days, probably that was 74. I was in India in 75. For a Westerner, extremely difficult. You know, I'm not exaggerating when I say in those days, you'd pay for something, they'd give you a slip that you paid for it. You take that slip somewhere else, somebody would check it, you take that slip, you'd get the product, then you take that slip again to someone who would again check it. You'd like go through 4 stages just to like get a shirt or, you know, some simple product. It was often like that. So as Americans, we don't do that. And so everything's moving really slow. I remember going to the post office once early morning, and one of the guys working there was sleeping on the table. I had to wake him up to mail a letter. So it's become better in India now, but those days it was really difficult for us as Westerners. And most of us Westerners couldn't stay in India more than 5-6 weeks or a couple of months. It was like we couldn't deal with it. It was just too difficult for us. So that's what the devotees were going through, and they were getting really frustrated. So they would come back every day, and the program was that all the devotees would go to Sandhya Arti, like around 7 o'clock, 6:37. And then Prabhupada would give class. He was living at that time in Juhu. So during one of the Sandhya Artiks, one of the devotees who was working to get this permit was kind of at wit's end, completely frustrated. You know that state when you're so frustrated, you just kind of stare into space, you just shut down. Basically, he shut down. So during the kirtan, he was just like a statue, just shut down. And Prabhupada saw that. So in the class, Prabhupada said something, and I don't think a lot of us realize how broadly what Prabhupada said can be applied, and that's what I want to explain. He said, you should dance in the kirtan even if you can't get the municipal permit. So Prabhupada saw him, very frustrated, very depressed, just sitting in the kirtan, looking quite miserable. And now he's telling him, what is he saying? Let's unpack what Prabhupada's saying because it applies to this topic. He's saying, despite whatever goes on, despite whatever failure or lack of success or whatever is happening in your service in the day, despite who you are, your own failings, etc., it should never affect you to the point where it allows you to become discouraged about the processes of Krishna consciousness. You should, we can just say, you should never be discouraged. So I want to take this not only to failure in service, but I want to take it to personal failures. Even if you can't get the municipal permit, dance in the kirtan, even if you fail in your sadhana, even if you fail yourself sometimes, Prabhupada is saying, don't be discouraged, don't give up. Because it's normal mentality, if you dwell on your humanness too much, you could become discouraged. And you might even think, it would be wrong to dance in the kirtan because I just failed or I did something wrong. Well, of course, if you do something really wrong, naturally, we're talking about normal wrong, which is slipping here, failing to do some service perfectly, promising yourself you're going to chant all your rounds before 10 a.m. and then you don't finish them till 11. Not like big things, but things for which we could become unhappy with ourselves, the human side of ourselves, which would be discouraging. So everybody goes through it, but as devotees, we tend to go through it more because we're now looking at the non-human side in ways non-devotees don't. Non-devotees, people in general understand, I'm human, I'm not perfect. But when you become a devotee, you are looking at perfection in every Bhagavatam class, isn't it? Every Bhagavatam class is talking about perfection. So perfection, it's like in your face all the time. So for those of us who have a tendency, maybe you could say have a guilty conscience or just have a tendency to not be happy when we're not doing well or not perfect or successful, it can exacerbate that tendency because the perfection's always in front of you. And you also see it around you in other devotees who you think are more perfect or more advanced than you. So when we look at what Prabhupada's saying, he is saying, whatever may happen and however you may fail in your spiritual life, don't sit depressed in Krishna consciousness. Go to the kirtan and dance, which in a sense is counterintuitive. It's like, why would I want to dance if I just, my guru asked me to do some service and I can't succeed at it? Why would I want to dance in the kirtan? I would almost feel guilty to dance in the kirtan. And that devotee had failed, apparently, in his service. Prabhupada didn't see it as a failure. I'm sure he saw it as a failure. Prabhupada saw that he was trying. But he probably felt it as a failure. And Prabhupada's saying, that's external. Krishna consciousness is transcendental. That access to Krishna consciousness is not dependent on the degree of service or how valuable your service is or how well you do it, or you as a person, how Krishna conscious you are, or how Krishna conscious you haven't yet become. Either case, dance in the kirtan. So I think that's important for us, because what I've seen is sometimes we can discourage ourselves to the point where we don't even want to speak of dance in the kirtan. At least he went to the kirtan, but we could discourage ourselves right out of the kirtan. We wouldn't even go in the first place, right? Hold on a second. Okay, trying to close the window shade. It's not cooperating. Give me a second. Try to pull it down. Oh, okay. All right, let's try this again. Just Okay, maybe that's a little better. So we don't want our humanness to become discouraging in our Krishna consciousness. And the reason I'm bringing up this topic, as I said earlier, is because that's what it looks like by externally reading the prayers of Gopinath. It looks like Bhaktivinoda Thakura is really discouraged. And you could thereby become discouraged also. So I think it's important to understand that sometimes when a devotee becomes discouraged with his own failings, he may have reasons or she may have reasons and they seem quite valid. Well, of course I'm discouraged. I wasn't able to do this or I failed at that. But that's not really how Prabhupada taught us to process Krishna consciousness. He taught us he taught us what Rupa Goswami taught us will be patient, right? Patience is one of the qualities that's required for advancement in devotional service. He told us to be enthusiastic. So now you might say, well, how can I be patient or enthusiastic if I'm failing, or I'm failing myself, I'm failing my guru, or I'm not able to do as much as I think I should or could or whatever. And what Rupa Goswami is saying, in spite of all of that, be patient. In spite of all of that, be enthusiastic, right? So the instructions we get never really justify or rationalize being discouraged, at least discouraged in a way that would hold us back from advancing. So the important point to understand is that the first two principles of surrender, if you remember these first two principles, it can guide you in this. The first principle is what's ever favorable, do it. Second principle, what's not favorable, don't do it. Now ask yourself, have you ever had a mentality that isn't favorable to your bhakti? And you rationalized the mentality because of something you did or didn't do? And I'm sure the answer is yes, right? So now you go back to this principle and say, okay, I've rationalized because I wasn't able to do this, I've rationalized in a way that I'm a bad person, a bad devotee, whatever, I can't forgive myself for doing this, etc., etc. If that rationalization discourages you, if it's not helpful, then it's against that first principle. Now, you could be hard on yourself, you could be relentlessly guilty and unforgiving, and you might be a kind of person where that actually helps you. That's what inspires you. I think for most people, probably it doesn't inspire them, but I don't want to say that some people wouldn't be inspired by that. So if that's what inspires you, you can forget everything I just said, and that's fine because it inspires you. But if it doesn't inspire you, it's not helping you in bhakti, then even though you could rationalize why you should feel horrible, it's not helping. Okay, you can feel horrible for a minute or two or 5 minutes or half a day, whatever. That's, say, well, shouldn't I feel horrible if I did something horrible? Okay, I don't want to say you shouldn't. I just want to say you shouldn't feel horrible in a way that's going to hold you back from advancing. If that feeling is detrimental to your bhakti, then it's against the second principle of surrender. Reject everything which is detrimental. So we're not saying I didn't do something bad. We're not saying I didn't fail, but it's how I'm processing it. It's what I'm doing with it. And if in my process with it, if in my processing of it, it's harmful for my own spiritual advancement, then that means I need to give up everything which is harmful, and I need to reconfigure how I'm thinking so it's helpful, right? So you might think, well, if I failed, how could that be helpful? Well, there are ways of thinking about failures that can be helpful. Like, What did I learn from this? How can I not do this again? What led me to do this? And then you might realize, oh yeah, I was very lax in a certain part of my spiritual life, which led me to do this. And this failure was a wake-up call that I need to be more careful in this area of my Krishna consciousness. And then you can think, well, that's a great lesson to learn from that failure. And you could actually be grateful for it in a sense, and maybe even excited in a sense that this lesson has come from this failure. So that way you've processed it, even though it's a failure, in a way which is positive. Now, some of you might say, but I've never done that before. It's so unnatural for me. I'm kind of defaulted, if I do something wrong, to just not forgive myself for it and become discouraged. And that may be true for many of us, but I think it's important to understand that default was something you brought into Krishna consciousness. It's not that Krishna consciousness is making you feel that way. And you need to distinguish between the two, because a lot of devotees will say, well, it's the Krishna consciousness that's making me feel that way. And I understand that, because just as we were talking about it, you have all these ideals of perfection and so on and so forth. But, and that's making you feel bad. But still, we should understand it doesn't make every devotee feel bad. So it's making you feel bad, but it's not making him feel bad, right? So that means it's a nature we have, it's a conditioning which we brought into Krishna consciousness. So I just want to make this point that don't ever think that it's the Krishna consciousness philosophy or whatever in Krishna consciousness that's responsible. I know it can seem that way, but actually it's just a catalyst for a mentality that already exists within us. I'll give you an example from my own life. I was not the best book distributor in ISKCON. I was okay. And I wasn't really the best at anything in ISKCON. I was okay. I think I did well in most of my services, but I wasn't like, when you think of book distribution, my name didn't come up. When you think of like managers, my name didn't come up. When you think of people who are experts in philosophy, my name didn't come up. So because of that, sometimes I would feel like I'm failing Prabhupada. Actually, my Vyas Puja offering is all about this, but you won't be able to hear it until August. But it's on this topic. And it's I think, a universal topic for a disciple. We always feel like I'm failing my guru. I could do more, right? Obviously, we can. Even if I'm not, no, you're not failing your guru. You'll look at a devotee who's saying, I'm failing my guru. And you say, but you've distributed so many books, inspired so many people, opened so many temples. But still he's feeling, this is no payment for what my guru has given, and feeling like, well, I could do more, I should do more. And so this feeling of guilt comes, or other emotions which are painful and not really inspiring. And so I would periodically go through that. And I had to really look at it, like, why am I feeling that way? And every time I would think about it, I would realize, well, there's nothing that Prabhupada said that should make me feel that way. In fact, everything he said actually should make me feel the opposite way, because he was always encouraging. Like if you talk to any Prabhupada disciple, they will all tell you, always encouraging. Like, it didn't matter what you did, you just got encouraged. That's what he did. That was one of his, you could say, one of Prabhupada's MOs, mode of operandus, was to encourage. So, the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I saw, well, that feeling of, I'm really letting Prabhupada down. I just could be better, but I don't know how right now. I don't feel good about it. And it was not coming from him. It was coming from me. And I don't I don't remember even feeling that way before I was a devotee, at least not consciously. But then coming in contact with now higher ideals, that activated something inside of me that made me feel like I'm not doing well enough. And every time that feeling came up and I would think about it and try to deal with it, I always came to the same conclusion. That's not coming from Prabhupada. In fact, the opposite is coming. It's coming from me. So I think that's important to understand. It's true, like I say, we're hearing about perfection and that could make us feel really bad, like I'm not perfect. But that feeling is not the intention of Shastra and not the intention of the Guru. The intention is to inspire. But sometimes with that intention to inspire, you become discouraged, isn't it? Have you ever been discouraged when you're supposed to be inspired? It's possible, right? You should, save Chennai, you should be the one. It's like, now he goes to bed depressed. Like, how am I going to do that? No, I was just like inspiring you, like, upgrade your service a little bit, but, shoot for the moon, you'll hit the stars, something like that. So, I've heard devotees tell me that their parents always discouraged them. And I said, well, what did your parents say? I said, my parents said, you have so much potential. You could be achieving so much more. They were trying to encourage them. And then the child felt it or interpreted it as my parents are always putting me down because they're saying I'm not good enough. And it wasn't the intention of the parent. The parent was just saying, you have intelligence and ability to do more. And I just want to encourage you. I just want you to know that you can. That's not the way they took it. So I think that's important. I think it's important for us to understand that things in our books and our Shastra, which are meant to inspire us, could actually discourage us if we have the wrong mentality. And so that's something to look at. So I just wanted to state that because in reading the song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, some of us could go through that. Just trying to figure out how he's feeling and at least understand that his feelings are really feelings of devotion and ecstasy, even though externally it appears like something else, not very ecstatic, not very pleasing, but they are. So now we have some comments. Or we have a comment from Toshan. Is it okay to do more kirtan or dance more in the kirtan purposely to push away guilt? Yeah, maybe to escape some service. Yeah, I actually did that as a young devotee when I had this. I always try to or take more prasadam. Yeah, eat more gulab jamuns. As you know, I have an analytical mind. So as you progress in devotional service, you kind of reach a place where you think, okay, I've met every problem and I've solved it. So now, there's no more traffic on the highway back to Godhead. And then you run into another traffic jam that you didn't expect. Because you think, well, it's 10 o'clock at night, there's no more traffic. And all of a sudden, and your whole life, you run into traffic jams. And so as an analytical person, I always try to analyze, well, when you get a surprise traffic jam, you thought you were over this, you would never have this problem, and you get it. How do you process it? What do you do? And I came to the conclusion that you should be more enthusiastic. So anytime that I had difficulty, if you saw me dancing in the kirtan like a madman, then you could think, oh, Mahatma Prabhu probably is having difficulty in his Krishna consciousness right now because he's dancing like a madman. That was my condition, like when I was a young devotee. That was my response. And the reason I responded that way is because if I failed at something, even if it wasn't a big thing, but I feel like I let myself down. Even sometimes you fail, but you're not even in control of your failure. Or sometimes you just say the wrong thing, you go, oh, but it's too late. You've done that before, right? Oh, I shouldn't have said that, yeah. After you get married, you do it more often because it's a more sensitive situation. So my thinking, I would analyze it, and my thinking process was, I just failed at something and I feel really bad. And this is an ideal time to be discouraged. And so Maya is going to come and do whatever she can to discourage me. So then I thought, well, I have to be really enthusiastic, because it's either I'm going to be enthusiastic or Maya's going to discourage me. That was my thinking process. And that's why I would dance in the kirtan. I go like, I'm not going to allow this to discourage me, because if I stop the kirtan, if I lose my enthusiasm, then I'm not going to make advancement. And then at that point, Maya will really deviate me. I won't have strength and energy. So that was the idea. That was my thinking process. And it's a bit counterintuitive, but it's kind of like when you're losing a game, sometimes you just play harder. You're losing. You can't score a goal. They're scoring goals all the time. And, one aspect is like, why play? And what's the use? And the other thought is play harder. Sometimes there's a boxing match and one boxer is getting beaten. In the middle of getting beaten, somehow or other, he hits the guy who's been beating him up for the last minute and knocks him out. And everybody's like, oh, we didn't expect that. So it's a little bit like that, Don't just sit there and get beat, fight back. So that was my thought process. And again, it goes back to this whole idea of what is favorable. So what is logical in your mind, in your conditioned mind, is not always favorable. Logical conditioned mind, when you fail, is like, what's the use? I'm a rascal. I don't deserve to go to the kirtan. I should not take prasadam. I shouldn't associate. I'm a black sheep, etc., etc. So that's kind of logical. But there's transcendental logic, and transcendental logic is jump in the kirtan, take prasadam, associate, take the medicine. That's the transcendental logic. But I don't deserve it, I'm bad. Yeah, well, you don't deserve it even if you're not bad. So what's the difference? Yeah, it's just different levels of not deserving it, So that's how I processed it myself. That answer your question, Toshin? Yeah, good. Yeah. So should we name this class Surprise Traffic Jam? I don't want to depress anybody, but there will be surprise traffic jams, believe me. And I would just advise you, when the next surprise traffic jam comes, don't let it discourage you. And surprise traffic jams are quite discouraging when you're older devotee, because as you get older, you figure, I'm above this. It shouldn't happen. And then when it happens, it actually can be more discouraging than when you're a young devotee, because as a young devotee, it's kind of expected, right? I expect the traffic jam, but I didn't expect it. I've been a devotee for 20 years, 30 years. I didn't expect this. 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, I didn't expect it. That can be extremely discouraging. So Prabhupada once wrote that if you become discouraged, everything is finished, because you lose energy. And Maya is always pushing, or at least not always pushing, but where there's opportunity, she'll push back. So Prabhupada's saying your enthusiasm is your energy to go forward, and Maya doesn't want you to go forward, and her job is to keep you away from Krishna. So she'll always try to push you away unless you're pushing. And if you push hard enough, she'll back away. So Prabhupada's saying, if we're discouraged, everything is finished. So taking that statement, my thinking process was, okay, there's no way I can allow myself to be discouraged, even if I have all reasons to be discouraged. And I'm sure all of us have reasons to be discouraged. You probably got a whole laundry list of reasons to be just look in the mirror. That's like enough, right? Look at you, you wretch. You know, right? And so, okay, I have all good reasons to be discouraged. But the point is, Prabhupada, Rupa Goswami, and anyone, even someone who's trying to inspire people to become materially successful will tell you, if you don't have enthusiasm, you won't succeed. So understanding that concept, then I thought, all right, even if there's valid reasons to be discouraged, I won't be discouraged. Look, sometimes things happen to me and someone will say, doesn't that upset you? Or doesn't that bother you? And the answer is yes and no. And the answer is yes. Naturally, like someone says, you know, like let's say I do something and it's helped lots of devotees and I'm getting feedback and devotees are saying, this is really helpful. You've really helped, you know, nobody's teaching this particular thing and we really need to hear this and this really is helping me. And then the next day I get a letter from someone, why are you teaching that? Prabhupada never taught that, you know, you're bogus. So is that upsetting? Of course it's upsetting. Am I going to get upset about it? No. Even though it's upsetting, I'm not going to allow myself to get upset, because if I get upset, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose my enthusiasm. So I have to preserve my enthusiasm. So my thinking process is, if something is upsetting, don't process it in a way that it upsets you, because you'll lose your enthusiasm. And if you lose your enthusiasm, you've basically lost everything, because enthusiasm is our life. So enthusiasm is like the petrol in our tank, in our car. If you have no petrol, you don't go anywhere. So I've always, you know, if you ever see me in a situation where you think, wow, what just happened to him is really upsetting, but he doesn't seem upset. Don't think that I'm not upset necessarily. I may not be, but sometimes I am, but I don't allow myself to be upset because it has no function. And then my other thought process is that if I'm going to be upset, I want to be upset about things that will actually encourage me to do something. Like this morning, I was studying the topic of pastoral abuse. What is pastoral abuse? And then I was studying the topic of spousal abuse, because it does come up that I have to deal with these things. And I need to educate myself, at least to some degree, to at least analyze when something like this is happening, not necessarily always deal with it. Not being a professional, it's not always best that I deal with it, although in some cases I can, but just understanding it, right? So it's very upsetting to hear stories about pastors who sexually were inappropriate with one member of their congregation, or a husband who is a member of the church, who's a respected member, who was having affairs on the side, addicted to pornography and so on. So it's really, really upsetting. There's no question. And but it gives me energy to try to do something to help prevent that as far as possible and help resolve that as far as possible within our own organization. So the anger, the upset is actually energy that inspires me to do something. Otherwise, it's like it's not so interesting to read those things. You know, Bhagavatam's more interesting. But because it's so upsetting and it's so common, it gives me energy to read and understand it. So the upset becomes positive. So that's why I say, don't be upset about anything unless it can help you. And if it can't help you, then why be upset? And if it can help you, be upset, right? We're all upset with what's going on in the world. There's so many horrible things going on in the world. We're upset. But that upset gives us energy to go out and explain to people Krishna consciousness and how people are being misled, isn't it? Yes? So it's again this same principle. Upset is okay if the upset inspires you. It's not okay if it discourages you. And so if you can't, like some upsets, there's no way I can process it to encourage me. It's just people trying to fault other people or people trying to fault me. Okay, I could be inspired. Oh, now I can be humble, because they're all telling me I'm stupid. Okay. But it's not well intended, so it's not really inspiring. And so I just decide that, okay, if that's not going to help me in my Krishna consciousness, why should I dwell on it? Unless there's some lesson to be learned, unless it's that the person is giving accurate feedback, well-intentioned, it's just going to make me upset, angry, and and there'll be no redeeming value. So that's how I process it. Okay. So Zauri says, I remember you once said that it's very difficult to upset you. Yeah, it's true. If you ever see me, I don't know if you've ever seen me, some of you have, get upset with a devotee, specifically a disciple. It doesn't happen that often. Sometimes it's kind of shocking. Wow, he's really upset. We don't normally see that. It's usually because they're offending another devotee. If you want to get me upset, just offend some devotee, I'll get upset. But if you want to exist in the world and remain enthusiastic in Krishna consciousness, you really have to be able to deal with the negative things that are thrown at you in a way that doesn't get you down, because it's easy to be upset by things, and so we have to learn how not to be. And the other thing is, it's right in the beginning of the Gita, second chapter. Krishna's telling Arjuna, just be equipoised. So really, not getting upset unless that upset. I mean, if someone's criticizing your guru, criticizing Prabhupada, yeah, we should be upset. It would be wrong not to be upset. It would be wrong not to do something as upsetting as they did to us, but some kind of defense generally is appropriate without anger. So obviously there are cases where we should be upset. Prabhupada was upset with Mayavadis. But just in terms of personally being upset about things that don't go our way, there's so many things to be upsetting and so many upsetting people around us, isn't it? And if we don't learn to be able to deal with them, we'll be upset all the time. Have you ever been in that space where you're like always upset? Like everything's bothering you? Yeah, it's possible to live that way. And so right in the beginning of the Gita, Krishna's telling Arjuna, be tolerant. Don't get moved by good and bad. People like you, they don't like you. Infamy, fame or infamy, hot, cold. It just went down the list of dualities, telling Arjuna, don't get upset by it. So if we're getting upset by all these things, we're not even out of the second chapter of the Gita yet, right? We're talking about Krishna and Vrindavan. Wait a minute. You're still second chapter Gita. You haven't learned that lesson. So that's an important, distinction to make. We want to dive into very high kata, and we're still allowing things on this plane to upset us. Well, how ready are we for that high kata? So I think that's important to acknowledge that it's necessary to be able to exist in this world and have a thought process and a level of emotional maturity that you've developed so that you will only get upset when that upset will actually help you. You can control being upset. Of course, what I mean is you can't always control how you feel in the moment because things are upsetting, but you can control your responses. You won't respond in a way that will degrade you or that person. That's the point. Is that okay? So We have Sarashwara says, after some rounds of traffic, how to overcome them. I think I sort of explained that. It's always having this mindset of it's kind of a success mindset, if you pardon that word, because it sounds kind of mundane, but it's a Krishna conscious success mindset. It's kind of like, okay, here's a new traffic jam. I've never seen a traffic jam like that before. So I didn't expect this one. This is a new one. And then your mind and your heart starts going into action. Okay, so how can I deal with this? You have this reservoir of knowledge and experience to draw on. And so you're always analyzing in your life how to deal with this new traffic jam, how to deal with that. You know, your best friend, you get in a big fight with your best friend, or the devotee you're doing service with that you've worked with for years, you're depending on, and then you have a fallout. That's really upsetting. How to deal with it? You start going through this process. You start, well, was it my fault? Did I say something wrong? Seems like it was his fault. But what can I do to rectify it? I don't want to go on like this. How does Prabhupada tell me to deal with this? It's just, we have to kick in thinking, how am I going to get through this successfully? As opposed to thinking, oh, this isn't fair. I'm going to blame others. Because once you start blaming others, you've actually lost the battle. That's kind of like admitting defeat. You know, like if you're wrestling or something and someone's choking you, you tap. It's like, stop, they're killing me. And that's your admission of defeat. So if we're in a traffic jam and we are complaining about, well, the government should have done this, but there shouldn't have been a traffic jam and all, then they shouldn't have cars like this with these fumes, you know, you're just blaming. It doesn't help you deal with the traffic jam. So that's the trap. A person who wants to be successful in Krishna consciousness will always try to figure out, okay, here's a new traffic jam. How do I deal with it? That's their mind will just default to what is the best way. So right now you're feeling really upset about something, but your defaulted mind will say, okay, how do I deal with this? Rather than go to that, it's not my fault, they shouldn't have done this, and go down that road of blame, it doesn't solve the problem for you, or it makes the problem worse. And we can say just another trick of Maya, really, when it comes down to it, isn't it? So at least my understanding, and I think this is kind of obvious, Prabhupada has given us so many books. And why? So that any situation we're in, we'll have an answer. We'll have a way to look at it, we'll have a way to deal with it. And if we give in, then it's like saying, if we give in, it's almost like, I don't want to use this phrase, a slap in Prabhupada's face, because that sounds too harsh. But it's like that. In other words, he's given us the answer, but I'm not accessing the answer. And I'm just giving in to my own emotions and getting upset about something, faulting others, condemning others, blaming others. That's a failure on our part, having all this information. At least that's the way I see it personally. So it's like, Sureshwar, you're a business person, right? So let's say something happens in your business where a certain product that you're selling is now, you can't get it anymore because COVID restrictions. You import from America, you can't get it. So now what do? You go home and cry. You go home and think, okay, well, what product can replace this? Or what else do we have to kind of remodel our business? Maybe we start catering to clients who need other things, right? So as a successful business person, that's how you'll think, right? You'll think, okay, well, we can't use this product. what is there else is there high demand for? Or can we branch out into different markets with new products? Right? So that's what I'm saying. It's the same. If you have that success mentality as a devotee, then whatever situation you come into, you will think, okay, how do I deal with this? What is the Krishna conscious way to deal with this? And guess what happens? Ta-da! Super soul shows up with the answers. If you want them. If you don't get them. Okay, we have other questions. One temple class, they said that even when everything seems to be going great in our sadhana, Maya tries to attack our mind, the old mind, and makes us think we are lousy devotee, we don't deserve going to the temple. We're serving because it is the only way she can push us back. Yeah. Well, here's another thought about this. Wherever you're weak, let's say you were having a debate with someone and you know their weakness, they have some arguments that are weak, you'll go there, right? And Prabhupada said, when you debate, he said, it's like putting pressure on a point, just hold it. And you know that's his weak point. He's going down. So in business, you try to find, if you're dealing with other people, you try to find the weakness in other people where you can take advantage. At least I was told. I wouldn't do that. I don't know if I subscribe to that, but this is what he said. You try to find the weakness in your competition or when you're making a deal and you go for it. So in the same way, Maya is going to go for your weakness. So this may be your weakness, thinking I don't deserve to go to the temple and so forth. So others of you may have other weaknesses, and that's where Maya will go. And if you were aware of those weaknesses, then when she's going there, you'll think, oh, I'm not going to go there because I have a tendency to think this way, and Maya is going to take me down the rabbit hole of that thinking. So knowing that I have that tendency, I have to be careful to kind of switch my mind around so that when I become discouraged, I know now's the time to become more enthusiastic. Oh, Christy, why are you so enthusiastic today? She says, because I had a terrible day yesterday. That's why. Counterintuitive, but logical from a transcendental perspective. Even from a material perspective, it's logical. That's how you succeed. You don't let circumstances discourage you. Any successful person will tell you that being successful is not easy. And we're just talking about material, not spiritual. So that's the idea. Okay. From Vrindavani. All glories to the assembled devotees. Thank you, Vrindavani. All glories to you. Okay. So there's no more questions here, so we can all go to sleep now. No. Are there any more questions, Nadia, from Facebook before I continue?
No, Maharaj.
Okay. So would you like to continue reading after that long introduction? Yeah, I think I wanted to talk about this because I think this is extremely important. It's extremely important to, I just want to underscore this point. It's extremely to understand your own nature so that when you read something or an event happens that discourages you, which shouldn't discourage you, which should even encourage you, but it discourages you, you understand, well, it's my nature. The way I'm understanding it or the way I'm processing it, I have that nature to become discouraged, or maybe I have that nature to very easily feel guilty about not being perfect. A lot of people are like that. They really need to be perfect. They're not happy with themselves if they're not perfect. And so when you're studying Krishna consciousness or you're trying to go forward in Krishna consciousness, you don't blame, you don't say, well, Krishna consciousness is so hard, that's why I feel guilty, or Krishna consciousness is always, devotees are always emphasizing you have to do this and have to do that, and that it shuts me down when they say you have to. And to understand that their intentions are to help you, but due to your nature, you may be processing it in a way that is not only your nature, but your past experience may create sensitivities. And so we need to make those distinctions, otherwise it can be hard and discouraging, right? Shivam Sharma has a question that we missed.
I posted it in the chat. Oh, sorry. I posted it to you.
Okay, post it now.
Yeah.
So this is from Shivam Sharma. Okay. I would not go to kirtan because I feel that will make me lose importance of pleasing Krishna and increased chance of committing same mistake again. I would go for kirtan once I get some confidence. I will not do this mistake again. Is this correct? No. No, because you use the kirtan to help you. Don't run away from the process. Like sometimes devotee will make a mistake and then some leader will restrict him from coming to the temple, but that's not always the best policy. In some cases, we have to restrict because that person may be unsafe to have that person around. But if it's not unsafe to have the person around, then restricting him can be the worst thing because he needs to be around devotees to get purified. So that's how you should think, Shivam. No, whatever mistake you've made, no matter how you feel, you need the kirtan to help you. And there's no qualification, right? So you don't have to qualify for the kirtan. It's given freely to everyone. I understand how you feel. I understand why you would feel that way, but just from a perspective of what's actually best according to the principles of sadhana, it's never good to stop sadhana as a so-called means of self-correction. It's kind of a devotional sentiment. Of course, I understand that. But I would use it sparingly because it may not work all the time. I mean, okay, I'm not going to go to kirtan until I chant 64 rounds and rectify this. Yeah, that can be there occasionally. But if it's like a regular thing, it may backfire. That's what I would say. I mean, there's a place for it. Madhavendra Puri and the sweet rice. He fasted because he thought about sweet rice before it was offered. So he wanted to atone for that. That's there. But, I never heard Prabhupada say, okay, we're going to do some atonement today, so you can't go to the kirtan. I never heard him say that. Today's atonement is no japa for you. No. Maybe no prasadam, but Prabhupada never even said that. So we want to be careful about not making up some kind of atonement that Prabhupada doesn't recommend. But I understand the sentiment is there. For sure, there is a sentiment. I don't deserve that because I failed. But it's actually the remedy for the failure. So, okay. So we have a little time. We can read something. Let me just bring up that document. Or Nadia brought it up. I'll just read it in the chat. This is text 5? No, I thought.
Yes, Maharaj. We finished the 4th text.
Text 5, part 2, correct?
Yes, Gurudev.
Gopinatha tumi to shakali jano. Apanara jane dandiya ekano. Shri charane deho sthano. So we'll read the word meanings. To me, you. To, certainly. Shakali Jano, know everything. Panara Jane, your own servant. Oh, now we have diacritics. I can't read it. I don't know what it's saying with the diacritics. I have to go back. Dandiya, having punished, like danda, stick, dandiya, having punished me, ekano, now, Shri Charane, at your divine feet, stano, please give him a place. Okay, translation. Well, Gopinath, you know everything. Now, having punished your servant, please give him a place at your lotus feet. You may be aware of this prayer by Srila Prabhupada. I think it is at the end of this famous Vyas Puja address that always ends up in the Vyas Puja books that Prabhupada made. I think it was 1932 he made this address. And Prabhupada is saying that led me, at the end of the eulogies, it let me suffer consequences for my past sinful activities, but something like this, paraphrasing, but I pray that I will always have the service and remembrance of my spiritual master. So this is the feeling of the pure devotee, that I deserve to be punished. But again, when we import that feeling into a very unhealthy psychology, it can produce all kinds of unhealthy ways of thinking, right? Like maybe I should kill myself. Or what's the use of going on? Or why should I try? Or so on. Why should I go and join the kirtan? Now we have talked about the feelings of the pure devotee and how they manifest in this kind of humility. And we were having some challenge in understanding why they would feel that way. So here's another challenge. Why would they feel like they deserve to suffer? And we told the story, I believe we told the story recently, that Prabhupada said, please open 108 temples so that when I die, I can feel that I've satisfied my Guru Maharaj and then I can go to hell. And then obviously you're thinking, why would Prabhupada say that? He's going to hell. That doesn't make sense. He's from the spiritual world. What's going on? And so we enter into the understanding of how a pure devotee feels. They feel, when we say they feel lower than a blade of grass. Well, if you feel lower than a blade of grass, then it's understandable. You feel like your destination is hell, that you should suffer for all your sins, because that's how you actually feel. And if we felt that way without having prema, it probably wouldn't work well for us. It could really disable us in many ways. So we are trying here to understand why a pure devotee feels that way. What's going on inside? Not even really inside their mind. We're trying to understand what's going inside their heart. And it always comes back to this, everybody's better, I'm the lowest. And which is, of course, inconceivable that anybody would think that way. Certainly we don't think that way. And if we did think that way, probably it wouldn't be because we're pure devotees. It would be because we have some issues. We would have quite low self-esteem to think everyone's better than I am. But when a pure devotee thinks that way, it's not a mental problem. It's actually how he feels. That's humility. Everybody's better. Everybody's a devotee except me. Can we understand how someone can think everyone's a devotee except me? It's very difficult to fathom that mentality. But what we can understand is that they see everyone better than themselves, obviously. everyone is better than me, I deserve to suffer. And you're thinking, well, what did he do to deserve to suffer? That's where you get confused, right? What did he do? He didn't do anything. He spread Krishna consciousness like nobody has before his time. He gave birth to Bhaktisiddhanta. You know, he's the pioneer, and he's thinking like this. You know, I deserve to be punished. So what we can say is that this is just something you can meditate on, like how a pure devotee feels that way. And also, what I think is important for us is that in our relationships with other devotees, when we don't get along, we think the other devotee is wrong, or we think they're really wrong, or we think they're offensive, etc., etc. It's nice to reflect on these prayers and remember how Bhaktivinoda Thakur thinks about himself, because sometimes we need a little more humility, don't we? Could you use a little more humility? Everyone out there, could you use a little more? Yeah, I think so. Right? It would make life easier if you had some more humility, right? So, you know, when you're challenged to be humble in a situation that really requires you to be humble, or would be a situation in which being humble would be really solve the problem, you can think of these great devotees and how they feel. You know, Prabhu, what you said, I didn't appreciate it, but you're better than me. And you know, what can I say? You know, now you can't be artificial, because that also doesn't work. But as we said before, maybe a little bit, like a little mercy will come. Maybe a little mercy. Okay, I'm doing an experiment here. Let's see. Ta-da, ta-da. Real light. That's too much, right? Mixing with my effulgence, right? It's too much. But we can always use a little humility, a little more. So that's what I take from these songs personally, that we try to like reflect in your life in all those situations where you could have used a little more humility, right? I mean, think how many there are. There's like every day there's something, isn't it? Where if I just had a little more humility, it would have smoothed it out, isn't it? So when we, you know, hear Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying things like this, we could think, okay, this is like, I need some of this. I need to figure out how to get some of this into my life, and then start thinking how, if I had more humility, how would I have acted in these situations in the past? And you'll start to see, I probably wouldn't have said this, I would have said that, I wouldn't have done this, I would have done that, like that. If I actually were thinking, seeing people, feeling that people were better than me, how would I respond? So that's something you can ask yourself. Okay. So we have some more. Okay, so Ananda says, when you mention that something is our nature, does it refer to this body's nature in this birth? And if yes, how is it different from conditioning? I understand. The nature is something that doesn't change, and conditioning can be. Sometimes sometimes I remove, sometimes I use the word nature and conditioning to mean the same thing, although they are a little different. When we talk of nature, generally, we're talking about 4 varnas and 4 ashrams as one's nature, guna, the quality, quality. His nature is Brahminical. He likes puja, he likes to study, he's very clean, he gets up early, he's not frivolous, he's Brahminical, that's what he does. That's a nature, or the nature of a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And some other, nature is just hardwired. You're extrovert, you're introvert. You are, super friendly, super shy. Now, some of these things can be conditioned also. They're not really your nature, they just become conditioned. You're not really shy. You just had an experience in your life where somebody scared you to death, and now you're afraid of people. It could be like that. So sometimes, it's hard to say, is it my conditioned nature? Is it my nature, or did it happen because of an experience? Like, why are you so shy? Well, I once spoke up and my teacher embarrassed me in front of the class. So from that day on, I just don't talk much. But I'm actually very talkative by nature. I just shut down. So that's something to consider. My personal approach to it is that even if something is not my nature, if it's necessary for me to act in a certain way, I will try to act in a certain way, even if it's for service. So just say like Ananda, let's say your nature is, you just like being at home and not interacting with lots of people. Let's say that was your nature. And then you have this talent where you can sing, and they organize concerts for you, and there's like 1,000 people at every concert. You'd rather just be sitting home playing your harmonium. But you have to go on the stage and be kind of flamboyant and extroverted and like that. So you do it for that hour because it will help the people in the audience get more into the kirtan. So you'll be like, welcome everybody. It's so amazing to see you. I'm so happy to be here, And let's say that's not your nature to do that. Your nature is just to go, thank you for coming. We're going to chant a few mantras, but you can't do that. There's 1,000 people. They'll fall asleep. So you do that for service. So sometimes, even though you may have a nature, like, being on stage is like the last place I want to be. No, but you have a talent or a service people need to hear. That's a forum for doing it. You're surrendered enough to say, okay, well, this actually helps people, I'll do it. And then, so for that hour, your nature is different. There's a lot of people like that who are speakers, who are actually introverts. You can't tell when they speak, but they're doing it because it's good for people, not because they like being on stage. Some people do like being on stage, being heard and seen. A lot of people don't, but they do it, and you don't even know that they don't like it because they don't show it, because they're thinking this is a message people have to hear, so I'll just overcome my shyness and do it. So I think that's important to understand also. In family life, this is extremely important, because you may have a certain nature which just doesn't work well in an intimate relationship. You can't, you like to be like on top of your husband at every moment and not give him a moment peace. And your husband likes to be locked in a closet at every moment. So either one of those, it doesn't work in a marriage. So you have to make adjustments and say, okay, I have to give him space, and your husband thinks, okay, I have to give her time. Even though it's my nature just to lock myself in a closet and just work on some geeky project. So yeah, so I've seen that in marriage, that there's a lot of adaptation that has to be made to make it work. And it may not be natural, but it may be something you have to adapt to. And I'm sure you have experience of that because you're married. And the same thing is true when you're working with groups of people. And some people are more sensitive. And so maybe you're not such a sensitive person. You just like telling people, this is your job, get it done. I want it 10 o'clock tomorrow. And you're not touchy-feely. The person who just told you that is like, I'm not going to do this for this guy. I don't like him. And then, someone says, you can't deal with her that way. She's not the way she responds. And you go, say, I'm really sorry. I was so hard like that. Like, if you could get it done by 10, that would be great. If not, just call me and we'll work it out. And then she's like, oh, thank you. And she gets it done by 10. So in dealing with relationships, it's if people aren't adaptable to the way other people are, it often doesn't work. Because, well, I'm not that way, I'm not sentimental, I'm not emotional, I just get the job done. All right, well, that's you. But she's not like you, or he's not like you. So I think where a lot of us get caught up and we'll just say, well, it's not my nature to be touchy-feely. But then when you realize in relationships, it can't just be all coming from one side of your brain, just matter of fact, this is how it's done and get it done. Because there's relationship also involved. Then when you realize that, you can adapt to it. Even if it's not your nature, you can just, hello, nice to see you. How are you? How was your weekend? Normally you just go in your office and don't talk to anybody because you don't like people. But you learn that, the people you're working with are going to be happier and work well, better if you're more personal. So you do it. So I think that's super important to understand. And when we talk about nature, we want to really look at it in terms of service. Like, what's my nature? How can I serve? And my nature, you look at that when you get married, so don't marry two people with entirely different natures. You may want to look at that when you're working in groups, just kind of testing out everyone's nature. Because if you have like ultra conservative devotees, they're not going to want liberals working with them. It's going to create imbalance or vice versa. So nature, some people are by nature more liberal, some are by nature more conservative in spite of the culture they're in. You have things like that. Some by nature are very, very friendly. Some are very quiet. We see all these different natures. More relationship oriented, more task oriented, like that. So those are things that kind of just like program into you, things you're good at. You think a certain way, you analyze a certain way. So then, don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't try to be an engineer if you're an actress. It just doesn't work. So those are some ways of processing. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but. And if just our nature in this particular birth, how important is it to nurture for spiritual life? Yeah, well, that's the nature Krishna gave you. So let's just see it as money. Krishna has given you money. Your ability, your particular intelligence is the money Krishna has given you. He wants you to invest that. So that's what you use. Does that make sense? Like you can't. You can put the money in the bank and get 2%. Well, inflation is 3%, but whatever. That doesn't work, so you have to use it. So Nanda says, we need to adapt our nature if it's needed for service. Yeah, if it's not, if it doesn't have any use, why bother? But if it does, then it's like one time the devotee asked Prabhupada, he said, what should we do with our anger? And Prabhupada said, well, it's something you have, so you're not going to use it for Krishna. You're just going to throw it away. You could actually use your anger because anger is energy. If it's used properly, you can use it. So if anger can be used, certainly our talents can be used, right? Yeah. Well, Ananda, there's a hell for people like us. And when we go to that hell, we're given a spreadsheet and numbers. And for eternity, we put numbers in columns. And we punch holes in walls in between out of frustration. But there are other people who love numbers, and they're happy doing that. It excites them. Numbers and columns is the most exciting thing they've ever seen. So, we're all different. Do you ever see somebody painting? They're just like painting. And if you're not an artist, they're like, I could never sit there and paint. You're like a big CEO type, go conquer the world type. And someone's just like painting. And you're like, I couldn't sit there and do that. This is like, You know, I would jump out the window if I had to do this, but everybody's different. So I think we all understand our nature to some degree. And I think the other thing that's important to understand, Ananda, is that if we repress our nature, it can backfire and come out in unhealthy ways. So, you know, you repress your nature for so long. Like Ananda sings beautifully. So if Ananda represses her nature for so long, one day you're going to see her on YouTube, you know, like as the lead singer for some hardcore rock and roll band. You know, it's like, what happened, Ananda? I repressed it too long. You know, it just came out this way now. I got to do this. So it could backfire, you know, like the 50-year-old brahmachari who finally throws in the towel, so to speak, and gets married. It's like, why did you wait till you're 50? You know, because I was suppressing it. You know? So there may be other things that you suppress that it's not going to really be a problem for you. It's not like, and that's for us, you know, that's for all of us to decide. And if we do something and it's very natural and very inspiring and people like it and it helps people become Krishna conscious, then I see absolutely no reason to do it unless there's something else that's more important for you to do at that time that could have a better effect on people. And so, but I like to do kirtan and I like to teach. So I designed a way that when I do kirtan, I can get people to come to classes from the kirtan. So we do both. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I have to get ready. I have to end this session so we can go on the japa session. And Krishna, please. I had a business and I had to do numbers. Oh, wow. That was a sacrifice. I always got the numbers wrong. It was just like, I could never get numbers. It was always 1 cent off here, $2 off here. It was like, you know, I could never get it exactly right. And when I finally got it right, I go to the accountant and you go, you got it wrong. So some people are, you know, and I was good in math also, but not accounting and math are actually a little bit different, right? Okay, that's why we have Guru Nishta for all the numbers. Just give them to her. That's why accountants were created, for people who don't like numbers, right? That's why business consultants were created, for people who want to do business who aren't really Vaishyas, right? That's why teachers were created, to teach people to do things that they don't naturally know how to do. If you naturally know how to do it, why do you need a teacher? You could teach the teacher, right? A lot of these teachers never went to Harvard Business School. They're much better at business than the professors at Harvard Business School. So, you know, nature, right? Yes? Okay, so thank you all for coming on our first Zoom/Facebook session. I'm going to be broadcasting on Zoom now. It's actually easier for me and I can see you. And yeah, I have more control with my camera. I can do beautiful things like this. It look like I'm in a movie, right? Which is especially good when I'm traveling and the background is like, there's things in the background I don't want you to see, which is other parts of this house. I may have to give class in the kitchen and you'll be looking at refrigerators and stoves. So you won't know what they are like this. So it has that advantage. Okay, everyone, we will see you. Some of you, we will see you in a few seconds. Let me go for japa, okay? So I'm going to end this and you're all going to disappear. You don't even have to end yourself. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.